Without further ado, Andy, you can go ahead and get started and you can share your screen. People who are joining, we invite you to put your questions in the chat for Andy, and we'll make sure we go through those questions at the end in the Q&A session.
Okay, so I got my slideshow here. And let me... Oh, okay, from beginning. Okay, so everybody I assume is just seeing a very big picture of mountains with a Kodo headline on top. I hope so. Okay, so I want to thank Lori, of course, and Guy, our chapter coordinators, for keeping us all together and for making this possible. Also want to thank Jean Ross, who was on the Kumano Kodo in May, about 5 months before Kate, my wife, and I were, and she was really helpful with advice and stuff. And also at the end, she's going to join us and we'll share in responding to the questions. And finally, thanks especially to my wife, Kate Stewart, who puts up with me and always keeps me on track and was really helpful on getting this presentation together and the accompanying guide that I did. So I have to admit that I approached going off to Japan in the Kumano Kodo with a lot of nervousness and trepidation. I had been to Europe more times than I could count, but I had never been west of the Golden Gate Bridge. So I was really nervous about being in a totally alien culture and also about the logistics, how to survive in a country where I couldn't even read the letters on a sign. And there was some part of me that was doing this because I wanted to check Japan off the bucket list rather than really wanting to go there. But fortunately, this all changed very quickly once I got there. Not only did it turn out that Japan was easy to navigate on every level, but everything functioned like clockwork. The people were polite and respectful. It was clean, crime-free, stress-free. And on the Kumano itself, it was gorgeous. So what started as a trip I made because I felt like I kind of had to do it, quickly morphed into, this is awesome, both on and off the Kumano. Now, in what follows, I will mostly focus on the details about the Kumano Kodo, the what, the where, and the how-to. And you should also have the written guide, the written logistical guide that came as an attachment to your reminder email. And I think Lori has also put a link to it in the chat. And that will have a lot more details than I could cover here. I'll talk for about 40 minutes. And as I said, we'll open it up to questions at the end with Jean Ross helping out on that. Okay, so what is it? Well, it's an ancient network of pilgrimage trails on the mountainous Kii, K-I-I Peninsula, about 150 miles south, kilometers, that is, south of Osaka. It's rooted in an amalgam of Buddhist, Shinto, and Kumano traditions, which are more about nature worship than worship of one almighty God. And as you walk, you'll see lots of religious shrines. There are 3 big ones called taishas, a whole bunch of little ones called ojis, but fittingly, the trails do not end at a shrine or the tomb of a saint, but at the base of Japan's highest waterfall. And I love the symbolism of that. One more thing to mention at the outset, the Kumano Kodo actually has a formal relationship with the Caminos de Santiago, their sister Caminos, as it were. And if you complete one of the trails of the Kumano Kodo, and you've done one of the Caminos in Spain, you're entitled to a so-called dual pilgrim certificate, which I'll talk about more later. Oops. Now my screen is frozen. This is not good. Let me. Okay, bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and then go back into it, and hopefully that'll clear out the problem. Okay. Slideshow. Resume slideshow. Okay, great. Okay, so don't know what happened there. Here's where it is. You can see the arrow in the large map of Japan. Just to get a little closer here, you see it where the arrow is. Again, it's south of the region where Osaka and Kyoto are. So the Kumano Kodo, as I said, is a network of routes. The ones that are still preserved today, which have enough infrastructure to walk, are the Kohechi Trail, which you see here in green, going from north to south, and then the Nakahechi Trail in blue here, which goes ultimately over to the water. That's the Pacific Ocean there. These are short. There's about 65 kilometers for the Nakahechi, for example. And on this map, you also see the three main taisha that I referred to before. There's the one in Hanggu, then there's the one in Shingu, and the final one in Nachi, which is also where the final waterfalls are. And what aren't shown are the many smaller shrines, the so-called oji, that you also see on the way. So today, most people walk the Nakahechi. It's kind of the Camino Frances or the Kumano Kodo. That's what we walked, and that's what I'll focus on. In ancient times, it was actually the Kumano of royalty. Huge processions would leave from Kyoto, which is the ancient capital of Japan, make their way to the Kumano region, and then proceed along the Nakahechi. First to the taisha at Hanggu, you see it here. Then actually along the river by boat to Shingu along the ocean. And then they go overland and back up to the taisha and the waterfalls at Taisha. Today, you can still do that by boat after Hanggu, but the actual trail itself follows two more stages through Kokuchi and then into Nachi. And from there, typically you would take a bus to Shingu because there's no walking trail. You might do that the day after you complete the actual walking. So the entry point is Tanabe City here on the left. You reach that most easily by a 2.5-hour train ride from Osaka. So in Tanabe City also is the Visitors Bureau. It's right at the train station where you get your Pilgrims passport, and which in general is the best source of information about the Kumano Kodo. I'll talk a lot more about that later. So from the train station here, you pick up a local bus. It's about a 40-minute ride to Takijiri Oji, which you see here. And from there, you start walking. Now, along the Nakahechi, you're pretty much constrained to these 5 stages that I've outlined on the left. And since you're basically in the middle of nowhere, and there really aren't any other places to stay other than these small villages which offer accommodations. And except for stage 3, which you're probably going to have to cut down anyway because of time constraints, that is getting there before dark, these stages are really short, and here's why. So this is what the first 2 kilometers look like. And while the trail definitely improves after this initial section, I can promise you that there's not even 30 feet of trail on the Kumano Kodo that resembles a section of trail that you see on the left from the Camino Frances. So the terrain is one reason why you're going to be walking short days. The second reason is it's never flat, not for a single kilometer in its entire length. So this little primitive graph shows kilometer number 1 on the Kumano Kodo versus the very steepest kilometer on the climb from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Roncesvalles. And I think the graph speaks for itself. Now, thankfully, again, the walk doesn't stay that way. It's never quite that steep. But on a per kilometer basis, the Kumano Kodo involves twice as much climbing as does the Camino Primitivo, which is generally considered the most difficult of the major Caminos in Spain and Portugal. So again, I bring these factors up for 2 reasons. One, to explain why you're going to be walking short stages, and also to warn you that if your idea of a kick-ass Camino is the Camino Portuguese, you're in for a bit of a jolt on this walk. But let's look at some more pictures of the trail itself, which hopefully will ease your mind a little bit, because it is a beautiful walk, and what awaits you at the end of each day is really special. So here you see the start through the so-called Torii, T-O-R-I-I gate, to the first Oji. That's a small shrine there in the distance there. And from there, you plunge into the forest, from which you only emerge at the end of each day where your lodgings are. Oops, skipped over some notes here. So as you can see, it's shaded and it's serene all the way. It's entirely on real trail. Now, I do want to linger for a moment on this picture on the left, which shows me disappearing down the trail. And I actually cherish this picture in particular because of the roughly 1,000 pictures that Kate, my wife, and I have of one or another of us disappearing down the trail in the vanguard. 999 of them show Kate in the vanguard. So I'm very proud that for one brief fleeting moment, I was ahead. Of course, the only reason I was ahead was because Kate was sick for a few days, which basically meant that every half an hour, she only waited for me 5 minutes instead of her usual 10. A couple more pictures of the trail. And it doesn't, it doesn't vary a lot from day to day. I mean, you're just in the woods, as you can see. It's gorgeous, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be the kind of changes that you get on some of the longer Caminos. And you won't see a lot of vistas. In fact, there are exactly and only these 3 panoramas to be seen in the course of 5 days walking. Top left is the end of day 1. Top right is the middle of day 4. And the bottom one is the middle of day 5 as you're approaching the ocean. And that's actually Jean's picture because the weather turned really awful. And Kate and I were unfortunately not able to walk that final stage. Okay, you can't get lost since you're in the woods all the time. I'm sorry. First of all, there's really no place to turn off. And when there is, there'll be a very clear sign in English. If you still blunder off in the wrong direction, you'll see a sign like you see on the right, not Kumano Kodo. And there are also little, tons of like little trail markers. Along the trail, you see lots of these ojis, the little shrines that I mentioned. You'll pass them every few kilometers. You can see they're only, 1-person, 2-person shrines. In ancient times, people worshipped at them, obviously. Now, they'll also have, each one will be accompanied by a little box with a stamp head in it, such as you see on the right, so that ultimately you can get your the little merit badge, your precious dual pilgrim certificate. Now, all the OGs are also accompanied by historical explanations. And this sense of the past and its continuing presence always struck me. It's like everyone and his grandmother kept a diary. The sign on the left, for example, refers to a diary in 1081. The sign on the right, talking about the ruin of the Doyukawa hamlet, refers to diary entries from 1201, 1210, 1497, and 1798. And that's just something I really appreciated. Whoops. So there won't be any place to stop for a hot beverage along the trail. Nevertheless, you'll see a lot of signs which describe how once upon a time you could have gotten a nice hot beverage, like this description here on the left of the ruins of the Matsuhata Tea House, which does you no effing good, of course. But you do have rest stops like the one you see on the right, where on this particular day, you can sit around and take some shelter from the freezing rain and get a stamp. You can see a little box for a stamp. And you can also commiserate with your fellow walkers. And though I haven't alluded to them before, you will see plenty of other people, not like on the Camino Frances, of course, but you won't go more than 20 minutes without running into a fellow traveler. Occasionally, you get some signs that are less ponderous, but fundamentally useless, like this one. In case you can't read it, Google Translate renders it as, don't let dogs roam free, don't feed stray cats, dog and cat feces and urine are prohibited. Now, I labeled this sign useless because in the course of 3 total weeks in Japan, we never saw a stray cat or dog roaming free. In fact, we didn't even see a stray gum wrapper, let alone dog poop. So I'm not sure why they needed these signs, though maybe Japan is so clean because the Japanese actually pay attention to them. Okay. At the end of day 3, you can see the map down here. So you're, let's see, at this right there, you're kind of in the middle of things. After dodging the non-existent dog poop, you arrive at your first big landmark, which is the Kumano Hangu Taisha, the first of the 3 big shrines. And you're about halfway into the walk, and it's also where the other Kumano Kodo trails converge. And it's here where you get the dual pilgrim certificate, which is a bit weird because it's as if you're getting your Compostela when you reach Burgos and still have 400 kilometers left to Santiago. I'll circle back to that in a minute, but first some more pictures of the Taisha. So it's a big complex with lots of buildings and lots of fun statues, as you can see. And there's Kate actually at the base of the stairs leading up to the shrine. And right near where she's standing was our familiar Camino de Santiago sign, which puts the distance at 10,755 kilometers from Santiago de Compostela, which is actually not that much further than the distance noted on the Camino marker in my backyard in Berkeley. Okay, back to the dual pilgrim certificate. This is Kate's passport, filled out with all the pretty stamps she got at the OGs. So when you get to Hangu, you head over to the Kumano Heritage Center at the base of those stairs we were looking at. You march up to the reception desk where there's no line, and you plunk down your pilgrim passports, both from Spain and the Kumano, and they greet you like visiting royalty. First, they make out your dual pilgrim certificate, which is hand lettered on genuine bamboo paper. Then, with great fanfare, they line you up against the wall, and rather than shooting you, they take your picture, so it can be posted for eternity on the website of the Dual Pilgrim Society. And there you go. I downloaded that picture from their website, showing Kate and me proudly holding our certificates. Now, the best is still yet to come, because after you get your picture taken, they then ring up the temple offices and direct you back up the stairs to the heart of the shrine, where you're met by an honest-to-God Buddhist priest who brings you into the shrine and performs a special taiko drum ceremony in your honor. And you get to beat the drum too. Now, as I said in my accompanying written guide, this may not be quite as special as the night you lost your virginity, but it's pretty damned close. But after this orgiastic experience, you still have 2 more stages to go, which might be a bit anticlimactic if all you care about is merit badges. But we were happy to continue because we love these taishas and the trail. And here's where the trail leads you when you come out of the mountains on day 5 to the taisha at Nachi and its complex of shrines, the highlight of which, at least for me, was this pagoda you see on the left, which is actually full of pornographic pictures, such as the one you see on the right. So it took a while for Kate to be able to drag me out of the pagoda down to the be all and the end all, the end of the road at the waterfalls. I just want to read the description of the falls from my guidebook that I had. And it goes, this waterfall has always been the object of worship as a symbol of life, as an axis connecting earth and sky. Many people have completed a 1,000-day ascetic training on the sacred mountain leading down to these falls, which includes standing at the foot of the falls and chanting sutra, shedding your ego and becoming one with nature. It's a little different vibe from Santiago. Okay, so beyond the waterfalls and this last stage, there's a kind of epilogue at the final taisha in Xingu there along the coast. And if you've walked the whole trail, as I mentioned, you'd probably visit Xingu on the next day because you need to take a bus from Nachi, or more likely you're staying at this along the ocean here as we did. You have to take a bus up to Xingu to actually see that last shrine. And just a couple more pictures of Xingu. So that does it for the walk part, but maybe the best thing about the Kumano Kodo lies in what awaits you at the end of each day. And these are the ryokans, which is actually just a generic name for lodgings of different types. So the best of these are the small family-run places we stayed in during our first 2 nights. They're very welcoming, spacious rooms, as you can see. We sleep on futon mats on the floor. And you eat dinner at your lodgings in company with the other guests, because in the little villages along the way, there ain't no restaurants or other places to eat. On the left here, you see an Australian couple we became friendly with. And you can see they're wearing yukatas, which is a kind of bathrobe that you put on as soon as you arrive, along with slippers, in which you wear around until you're ready to leave the next day, which means that you don't need to bring any extra evening clothes since you're basically walking around half naked all evening. Top right is another interior shot of one of the places we stayed. In the background, in the picture on the left, you see one of our hosts, and he actually lived in Spain for a couple of years and walked some of the Caminos there. And here he's actually playing flamenco music for us. Bottom right is a breakfast scene at the hotel we stayed in at the end of our walk, which was right on the edge of the ocean. And again, as you can see, even at breakfast, everyone is still, most people are still sitting around in their yukatas. So here you see Kate in the picture on the left with our hosts on our second night. And the one on the right is a picture of Jean showing some of her hosts at one of her stays. And what struck me later about this picture, the picture of Kate, beyond the fact that it shows my vertically challenged wife being equally tall as our hosts, is that I took this picture at all. Because Kate and I have stayed in hundreds of different places on our various Caminos, and only in one or two other instances did I feel so warmly towards our hosts that I asked them to pose with us. So I think that the very fact that this picture exists, and we took other pictures like this in Japan, says a lot about the kind of welcome you get there. So the other great feature of the lodgings is the onsens, which are basically big hot tubs fed by the adjacent hot springs. And what you see on the left is a never before seen shot of an indoor onsen. And the reason you never see a picture of an indoor onsen is because everybody is naked, and pictures obviously are strictly prohibited, which didn't deter my anarchistic wife, of course, though fortunately the onsen was empty. So the rules are a little looser outside, of course. Lower right, you see an onsen in the river by one of our lodgings, and they give you a shovel to dig out the underwater hot spring. On the top right, you see the view of the ocean from our last ryokan room. And in the lower left-hand corner, if you look in that picture, you can actually see one of the surfside onsens that we relaxed in. So when I did a presentation on the Le Puy route in France, I said that to compare dinner at a French gîte to dinner at a Spanish albergue is like comparing dinner at the French Laundry to dinner at Burger King. And even that metaphor is not adequate to describe the difference between dinner at a ryokan and dinner at a Spanish albergue. And what a total gourmand like me appreciated, along with the quality, was the quantity. Because what you're seeing here are pictures of one of only multiple courses that you have each night. And that's only dinner. They get you really fueled for breakfast the next day, as you see from one of several courses we had for breakfast in the morning. That's on the left. And what you see on the right is a so-called bento box that you'll be given for lunch. This one I actually bought in a convenience store when we were heading back from the Kumano to Nara. And I included this picture because it shows the price, 698 yen, which translates to $4.75. And so the next time you're in your local Safeway, see what they're selling bento boxes for there. Bottom right picture is a sign that was on our dinner table. Pescatarian means fish eater. It was for Kate, who doesn't eat meat. And just to point out that they are very good about, catering to your food idiosyncrasies, but you do have to notify people in advance. It's pretty rude to just show up and tell them you're a vegan and expect them to accommodate you. Now, I'm about to transition more into logistics, and I thought the next slide would be a good bridge. So the picture on the left, on a literal level, shows Kate making up our futon beds. But there's a backstory here. When told that we had to make up our beds by ourselves, we really had no idea how to do that. So we turned to Google. So here you see Kate on the left making up our beds while watching an instructional video on YouTube, courtesy of Google. And that's not the only thing Google helped us with. It also instructed us that same night on proper etiquette in onsens and at dinner. A week before that, when we arrived in Tokyo, Google Maps directed us through the airport, onto the proper subway platform, through a train transfer, and eventually to the front desk of our hotel. And Google Translate enabled the check-in process. Since the desk clerk didn't speak English, everybody just automatically whips out their phones and communicates that way. And on and on. It answered questions about train schedules, about where to find seafood tempura when Kate had a sudden yen for it one night, about what kind of tree we were looking at. And after 3 weeks in Japan, I couldn't figure out how anyone ever traveled there without Google. Now, you're undoubtedly wondering what Google has to do with this picture of Kate on the right in her yukata. Well, 2 days after I took this picture, our waitress at dinner suddenly came over to Kate, hauled her off to a corner of the dining room, stripped open the yukata, leaving her very exposed to anyone in that corner of the dining room, then rewrapped it, led Kate back to our table, and then disappeared without a word of explanation. Now, had Kate consulted Google before putting her yukata on, she would have discovered that by putting the left flap underneath the right flap, as she had done, she had dressed herself like a corpse, which is very bad karma. So Google, in Karl Malden's immortal words, don't leave home without it. Okay, good as Google is, you'll want something more specific to do your actual planning, which is where the Tanabe City Kumano Tourism Bureau comes in, which is run by a Canadian right in the train station in Tanabe City and is totally devoted to the Kumano Kodo. There's lots more details about it in my accompanying guide. But in general, they have an unbelievable website and they publish this comprehensive guidebook. And these resources will cover everything you need to know: accommodation lists, suggested itineraries, etiquette, local bus timetables, luggage transport, how to get your dual pilgrim certificate, etc., etc., etc. And when you've digested the Tourism Bureau's resources, you move on to the next step, which is organizing your walk. So you can't wing it. Forget about it. There's very limited accommodations. It'll be filled up months in advance. Well, assuming you want to do it yourself, you want to organize it yourself. The easiest way is through the Tourist Bureau, which has a comprehensive list of places to stay, as I noted on its website. So you just identify the places you stay, and they can make the reservations for you. But give yourself time, because the process takes some time. And I'd be starting right now if you're thinking of a spring trip. It's not even too early to start thinking of the fall. You can also check out booking.com, because a surprising number of places do turn up there, but make sure you identify them first using the Tourism Bureau's website so you know that they're actually on the Kumano Kodo. In my case, I must confess I was totally freaked out by the planning process. The very idea of being in a place as alien as Japan boggled my mind. My brain simply couldn't process even the Japanese names. Nakahechi, Kohechi, Shingu, Hangu. These names were just indistinguishable sounds in my head. And I had very little time to plan, as we only decided to do this about less than 3 months before we actually went. So to my embarrassment, I actually found myself in the position of the Camino newbie, who is so freaked out about going off to a foreign country that he pays triple what it would have cost him had he done it all himself. And I hired a company to arrange everything for me, for us. And while my ego was bruised, the company I hired, Oku Japan, was wonderful and very responsive. And given our circumstances, we probably wouldn't have done the Kumano without them. So that brings us to costs, both on and off the Kumano Kodo. So there's no cheap solutions like the hostels in Spain, but even $90 to $150 a night per person, which includes your food, is a heck of a lot less than you're going to pay for a motel and food anywhere in America. And the really good thing, once you get off the Kumano, is that Japan now is dirt cheap, with the yen at an all-time low. So normally we paid for dinners with cash, but I think we did pay a couple of times with credit card, and so my credit card kind of gives you a sense of what costs are like. 2 dinners in Nara, $31, $26. 1 dinner in Kyoto in the touristy Gion district for $43. That's dinner for 2, tax, tip, and ample alcohol. Same thing, hotels by and large are not going to run you more than they will in Spain. Just another example, museum admission, the big museum in Tokyo was $6. I checked the price for getting into the Prado in Madrid, it's $16. So while the Kumano Kodo will be more expensive than doing a Camino in Spain, it's only 5 nights, and your overall trip is not going to cost a lot more. Okay, one almost final slide, shipping your gear. Well, you're probably not going to go to Japan just to walk the Kumano Kodo for 4 or 5 days, which means you're going to be carrying a bunch of crap with you that you won't need on the trail. So you're in luck, because Japan actually has an incredible system for transporting stuff from anywhere in Japan to anywhere else overnight. There's no planning necessary. You just take your bag down to the desk in the hotel, tell the clerk where you wanted to ship it. 24 hours later, it'll arrive at its destination, where they'll hold it even for weeks until your arrival. We did that. We shipped our bag from Osaka, where we were before the Kumano Kodo, to Nara, where we were heading afterwards.
Hi, John. How you doing?
You got Laura, you're on. That came over.
Oh, okay.
Watch yourself. We shipped our bag to Nara. Just really simple. They held it for us for a week. It cost us $10 to ship 1 bag. You can also arrange day-to-day shipping along the Kumano Kodo through the Tourism Bureau, but it might be more of a nuisance than it's worth. You don't need much on the trail, as I alluded to before. From the time you arrive at your ryokan until the next morning, you'll be in your yukata or bathrobe without even underwear underneath. You're wearing slippers provided by your lodgings. That means you don't need an extra pair of pants or any kind of evening clothes, or even a change of underwear, since your underwear will be dry by morning. And you don't need to pack a sleeping bag or a towel. So it's really easy to do without shipping things day to day, basically you're only going to be carrying what you'd be carrying in a day pack anyway, but each to your own. If you want to ship stuff day by day, it's available. Okay, to wrap up pretty quickly. It's brutal in summer. If you can avoid June through the very end of September, do it. It's not only hot, very hot, but the humidity is like Washington, D.C. in August. Tokyo and Osaka in the first week in October were pretty unbearable. It's a little cooler on the trail, obviously, because you're in the shade, but you're not going to have that when you're walking around in the cities. Optimum times might be March, early April with the cherry blossoms or the fall foliage in November. Okay, 2 final slides. I recognize this is what for me was the worst thing about Japan, and I recognize that many people will think that sleeping on a futon bed is really cool, but put yourself in the position of a creaky 74-year-old geezer like myself, sleeping on a hard floor with only the thinnest of mats. And these futon mats are not like the ones you find here. They're only like an inch or so thick. So sleeping on them on a hard floor just isn't much fun. And getting up to go pee in the middle of the night is even less fun, which literally and metaphorically brings me to my favorite thing about Japan. Yeah, so whether you're in a hotel room or in a public toilet in the middle of nowhere, this is what you'll find. Not only a scrupulously clean bathroom, but a heated toilet seat and a built-in bidet with hot water. This picture is actually a public toilet in the middle of nowhere adjoining a bus stop. So one final note about these marvels, and it'll be my closing note. Christmas is approaching. I know it's not very romantic, but if you want to buy your partner something he or she will really appreciate, Costco has these very same toilets available. And what better way to experience the best of Japan in your life right now? Okay, so that does it. Always happy, if there are questions you have, people that email me with, what you, with any follow-up questions. That's my email. I'll leave that up there for a minute if you want to write it down. And at this point, we'll take questions. Lori's been gathering them, I assume, in the in the chat. And I'm going to start off with some questions for Jean. And as I mentioned, Jean walked the Kumano Kodo in May. She was super helpful to me, both before and after. And she did things in, some ways a little bit different from me. So, so I have a couple of questions. And the first one is, I alluded on purpose to the Camino Portuguese earlier in the presentation about how it might be kind of a shock to go from one to the other. And I know, Jean, that's the Camino you yourself walked previously. So, briefly, how would you compare the experience on one against your experience on the other?
Well, I think you're right, Andy, and what you were talking about, how it's very isolated. The Portuguese was wonderful because it was, through all these small towns, and there were lots of coffee shops along the way, restaurants. On the Kumano, there's none of that. The only places where you're going to have food and drink are mostly at your accommodations. And there was one place where there was like a roadside shop. It was where they did sell some food. But otherwise, you pretty much depend on your accommodations to provide you an incredible dinner and breakfast. And then a lot of them, the ones that we booked anyway, did provide, as you said, the bento box lunch, which was really wonderful. So that was completely different. The terrain, as you said, completely different. This was the hardest hike I've done and ever done as far as multi-day hikes. And especially the last day that you and your wife were not able to do. That was I had, my friend was very meticulous about mapping out all the elevation changes. That last day, it was 1,260 meters
Whoa.
elevation change. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is that? 3,000 feet or something, right? So
it's
that was
closer to 4, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really challenging, but so you feel great after you get through that. But yeah, it was beautiful. Like you said, walking through the forest, it was very quiet. Someone asked about seeing other travelers, other than when we stopped at some of those little covered areas where you could have lunch. We would run into people there, but as we were walking on the trail, it was very seldom that we saw other people. Very seldom.
Yeah, interesting. We did see people, and like I said, maybe it's rare to go more than 20 minutes, a half an hour without seeing somebody, but maybe we were just walking slowly, and so everybody was overtaking us. I don't know.
I don't know. And it's for the group. It's my friends and I went in May, and the weather was great. We did have one day when there was light showers, but otherwise the temperatures were in the 60s into the low 70s. And we didn't have any trouble as far as the condition of the trails, which Andy did have trouble with the rain that he had. But yeah, that was a great time to go. I would definitely recommend May. Earlier in the spring, when they have the cherry blossom time, I think that is a popular time to go because of that. But then, of course, you're going to pay a lot more for some of your accommodations, like in the big cities. Osaka is really, really, I think, popular at that time of year because of the cherry blossoms.
Yeah, good point. Good point, right. I think it was only in Tokyo, we went to Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Hiroshima. It was only in Tokyo that we paid more than $100 a night for a hotel room for the two of us. And we were staying by and large in more higher end places than we stayed at in Spain or France or Italy in our previous walks. So yeah. Let me ask you about as I said, we used Oku Japan, which made it made it really easy. It was at least twice as expensive as what it would have cost if we'd done it ourselves. And you used the services of the tourism bureau to make your arrangements. Can just describe what that was like, difficult, easy?
Right. Yeah, so we started planning through the Tourism Bureau. I believe my friend put in requests for reservations in November for our May trip.
Okay.
And some of the accommodations, when you go on their website, they ask you to pick your top 3 choices in the different locations. Some of the accommodations don't book that far ahead, like 6 or 7 months. So some of them we had to wait until 3 months before our expected dates to be there before we got confirmation. So a lot of times it was kind of a little nerve-wracking to have to wait like that. But the Tanabe Bureau, the travel bureau, was really great about reassuring us that we would get rooms and not to panic about it. And they were really helpful with all the logistics information. You definitely, if you go on this hike, you want to stop at their offices in Tanabe because they're very, very informative. They have all the maps that you could want, and of course the passport to pick up, but they can tell you exactly what times to expect buses in different parts of the trail that you do need to take some public transit on. But so we did have to plan quite a bit ahead. And I think, that's where you really.
And did you? So we just arrived. We took the train from Osaka early in the morning. Got there around midday and started walking. So I mean, we walked into the tourist bureau. We got our passport stamped, and we spent 15 seconds there. But I would think that if you're planning it yourself, you might want to get to Tanabe, and we didn't need we didn't need the services of the tourism bureau
Right,
because we had
right,
all the
right.
itinerary written out for us, and so that was easy. But I would think if you want to do it yourself, it might be a good idea to get to Tanabe City the night before. So
Right.
then you could spend, some hours in the morning getting last minute information. And
Yeah,
that's what
that's
you
what
did,
we did.
right?
Yeah, that's what we did. We went into Tanabe from Osaka. We spent one night in Tanabe, which is a lovely little town. And then, so we went into the tourism bureau that day that we arrived in town, talked to the people there, got some information, and then we were ready the next day we knew what times the buses would be leaving for Takajiri and everything. So we didn't feel at all nervous about getting started. So we did spend a night there.
Yeah. So maybe the most important question of all, is there really any feature of Japan that stands out for you even more than the toilets?
The food, absolutely the food.
Even better,
I
well,
love Asian food.
it's all
Yes,
part
I
and
love
parcel of
Asian
the
food.
same thing, right?
Yeah, but the pictures that you showed really didn't do it justice. How beautiful the presentation. The Japanese are incredible, incredible cooks, incredible artists, and they really pride themselves on serving you. It was really incredible. Yeah, that was my favorite part. I think was all the food that we had.
Anything else that, as I was talking, I mean, you didn't hear this in advance, so anything else that struck you that anything important that I left out or that you'd want to add?
Not that I can think of. We get the places that we each stayed. I mean, you were talking about not having to carry too much, which of course we all, my group, we had a change of clothes with us, but most of the places we stayed had washers and dryers. And they were happy to let us use them, or there's some places they charged a nominal fee for using them. They provided the soap if you needed that. And
but you also, as I recall, you didn't ship your stuff day to day. You just left your stuff.
We left, right. We did what you did. Yeah. We sent our suitcase, whatever we were going to use after the hike was over. We sent to the next hotel that we were going to stay at.
Gotcha.
And they kept it for us. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll stop the screen sharing. Then let me do that. And so, Lori, why don't you just feed us questions? And
Hello.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Andy and Jean. Amazing presentation. I'm really wanting to do this Camino Kumano Kodo. So questions. We have a few here in the chat. Let me see. Let me go scroll back up to the top. Okay. Are there solo travelers?
I saw a few. I mean, mostly it was couples or small groups, like those Australians I showed in their yukatas. They were in a group. There must have been about 10 of them altogether. But mostly couples, but there were definitely single travelers. Yeah. What was your experience, Jean?
We mostly saw couples.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But you won't feel out of it if you're a single person.
No.
Okay, and let's see. Okay, Marta has a good question. Once arriving at the ryokan, are there additional sites to see before retiring for the night?
No.
The town's very, very small. You get to your ryokan and that's it. Yeah. There's not a lot of sightseeing at all.
There was a museum in that very first town you get to, it's only 4 kilometers in, but it was closed when we got there. So
The only place was outside of Hongu where the office is for the Pilgrim certificate and everything. We didn't stay there. We had to actually take a little bus to another. There are 2 onsen towns that are very famous in Japan. And one is Kawayu, and the other one was I'm blanking out. Yunomine. Anyway, those towns are where all the little hotels and ryokans are, and that's where we stayed. And there was there were some little restaurants and things that you could go to, little shops. But that was the only place that I can think of on that whole trail, other than Shingu was a big city, and there was some stuff to see there. But otherwise, no.
And
That's
just for
not sightseeing.
clarification, Shingu is at the very end.
At the very end,
Yeah,
right,
yeah. So yeah, it's only Hangu and those onsen villages beyond Hangu. Yeah, you got to actually take a little local bus when you get to Hangu to get to those onsen towns. And
Mhm.
yeah, but that's the only place where there's any sign of civilization.
Right,
I mean, in the
right.
sense of, restaurants and things.
Right.
To do, yeah.
Right.
Okay, good segue into the next question. So when you were there in Japan, did you visit other places? And how long were you there total? So both Andy and Jean, if you can answer that. Because we like to make the most of our trips, especially when it's a long flight.
Yeah, I mean, we went to Tokyo a few days. We went to Osaka for one full day. We went to Kyoto for a few days. We went to Nara again just for a full day. And then we went to Hiroshima at the end for a few days. So we were there a total of 3 weeks. And I hate making recommendations because, everybody's got his own sense of like what's great. And so,
Yeah, our trip was 2 weeks in total. We flew in and out of Osaka, and besides we were on the trail for 6 nights, 7 days, because we actually added an extra night outside of Hongu, just because we figured we might want to rest. And it actually turned out perfectly because that was when it rained. So we did a short day walk through the rain, and the hotel that we stayed at gave us umbrellas, and so it was actually a very nice day. But outside of that, when we got into Osaka, we spent the night there, went to a baseball game. And then after we were done with the hike, we went back to Osaka again, and we did a walking food tour in the city. Osaka is a big city. There's a lot to see there. We did a food tour. Then we went to Kyoto. We did also a walking tour of a bicycle tour of the city, and another food tour there. And we visited the geisha district and all that. And I wish we were only there for 2 weeks because of time constraints, because my husband and I are still working, but I would have easily spent a month in Japan. There was just so much to see. I wanted to go to Hiroshima and some of the other areas. So yeah, I definitely would recommend spending as much time there as you can.
Jean, thank you. That sounds awesome. I'm curious about this baseball game you saw.
Oh, they're avid fan. Boy, they really get into it.
All right, as long as you're on that. When we got to Hiroshima, the Hiroshima Carp, that's the baseball team there, we're in the playoffs. So as we're on the train from, I think where the heck were we? Kyoto to Hiroshima, it was just full of Hiroshima Carp fans. We really wanted to go to the game, but of course it was sold out because it was a playoff. So anyway.
Next question.
Other questions, Lori? Oh, Lori disappeared. I think she's answered a phone call.
Hey, sorry. Okay. Let's see. Oh, so seeing that really thin pad you were sleeping on, I'm curious if Pilgrims or other people doing this brought thermarest or,
Yeah, let me jump right in there because I know where you're going. A tip on those is that they're always kept in a closet in the room where you're staying, and the closet will be open. So there'll always be 3 or 4 or 6 extra futon mats. So I really recommend just, sleeping on 2 or 3 of them, and that really helps because
yeah. First of all, if you go through the Tourism Bureau website, when you're looking at accommodations, their listings of accommodations will say if they have Japanese style beds or Western style beds or both options. And just in case you really want Western beds, one of the places we stayed did have Western beds, but all the other ones were Japanese style, which didn't bother me. But my husband also was not that comfortable. But by the end of our days there, he figured that out, Andy, that there were extra pads in the closet, and he put as many as he could on the floor. Yeah.
Okay, and the food sounds wonderful. At the end of the day, to kill the pain, wine, beer, or sake?
We
Whatever you
had
want.
every place we stayed had beer that we could buy, and it was maybe $2 for beer. So that was the option besides what they provided for the meals, which was usually tea or water.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, let me add, I think every place had, if you're not a sake fan, I'm not a sake fan. Every place had, wine, real quote unquote wine, like, French wine or Italian wine or American wine, and also coffee in the morning. Every place had coffee in the morning. That was a concern of ours because we can't get moving without coffee. So we took lots of instant coffee, but we didn't need to use it.
Yeah, we did the same thing. You're right. And some of the smaller places we stayed had a water teapot, and then they had like they looked like tea bags, but they were actually coffee bags, a little pour over coffee. Yeah, so you could make your own coffee in the morning. But yeah, we were really worried about that too, because it seemed like everywhere I was reading, they said, oh no, it's only tea everywhere. But no, we did have coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee. Okay, that's important.
Very.
But no cafe con leches over there.
No galaos, no.
Well, they had
Okay.
Starbucks. They
Yeah,
had
and
Starbucks.
some of the places, they have Starbucks. Some of the this one place we stayed in Tanabe was actually a cafe that served this. They had their own special kind of cake that they baked that they were known for. So they had a little coffee shop. So yeah, you could order espresso drinks and have their cake there too.
Nice. Okay, so let's see. Just to confirm, how many days did you walk, Andy?
Okay, so we were supposed to walk 5, and the weather turned into like freezing rain on our 4th day, and it was, the walking, the last 2 days is very rocky. There's one picture in there. So given that the forecast was as bad for the 5th day as the 4th day, we didn't do it. We both took some falls on day 4. And so anyway, we were supposed to walk 5 days, but we walked 4 days. I think Jean walked the full 5 days. It's basically, basically 5 stages. You could, if you were really ambitious, combine the first 2 stages, but that's the one with like, the really horrible terrain, and it would be a hell of an ambitious first day.
Well, can you split stages like you can on the Camino?
No.
Well, there are, if you go to their website for the Tourism Bureau, they do have suggested itineraries. And the whole Nakahechi is a 5-day, I think it's actually a 5-night, 6-day trip, I think is how they map it out. But you can, if you want, do a 2-night or 3-night, because as long as you get to Hongu, if you start in Tanabe, I think that you qualify, right, Andy, for the certificate. And so that would be only the first half of that trip. So like 3 days of walking.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do that part by itself if you wanted to.
Yeah. But you can, like Jean stayed over an extra night. You could, but it's basically 5 days of walking, and there's not much choice. There's just these 5 villages, so or 4 villages along the way, so you got to stay there. And yeah, so it's not at all like being in Spain or Portugal in that respect.
Okay, next question from Brooke Taylor. How long is the flight, and is it from San Francisco, SFO?
Yeah, there were and I go into, there's a section on this and a lot of the other things in that guide you got. So it's slightly less time to fly to Japan, to and from Japan, than it is to fly to Western Europe, by like a half an hour each way. And there are non-stops to Tokyo, it's all that's in the guide. And there's also a nonstop to Kyoto. I'm sorry, to Osaka.
Osaka,
So
yeah.
we flew nonstop to Tokyo and we came back nonstop from Osaka.
Yeah, we flew round trip Osaka SFO, and the flight is, I'm looking at my friend's chart who was so specific, 11 hours, 40 minutes going. And then coming home, it was 10 hours, 25 minutes. I guess we had a tailwind. So it was shorter coming home. Oh, you're muted, Lori.
Sorry, did you go to Mount Fuji?
No, because my group did not go to Tokyo at all. And Mount Fuji is outside of Tokyo.
Okay. Let's see. So, Brooke, again, question. So the 24-kilometer stage has to be done in one day?
No, no, that wasn't one day, right?
I think we're on that second day. I think that's the one exception that Jean stayed. There's a little village about 4 kilometers beyond where we stayed. So that's like the one exception where there's, like an extra town. So I think Jean did stage 2, added like 4 kilometers, and then stage 3 got it down to around 19 or 20. Now, in our case, there was no way from where we were staying that we could have walked 24 kilometers because when you get at the end, one of the constraints is like the bus schedule. And so the last bus, or the last bus that's going to get you somewhere in time for dinner from Hanggu to those little onsen villages where you stay at, is at 4:30. And you want to get to Hanggu in time to get your, dual pilgrim certificate. So there's no way we could have walked 24 kilometers, leaving even at 7 o'clock over that terrain to, make it to Hanggu by, say, 3 o'clock in time to get all the stuff done and catch the bus. So there is, and we did this on that day, there is a bus you can take that'll cover the first 8 kilometers and get it down to 16. So we did that. We started walking about 7:30 and we got to Hanggu, and we were hauling ass because we knew we had time constraints. But it still took us till close to 3 to get there. So, that gives you an idea of how long it takes you to walk 16 kilometers. And we only stopped like for a 20-minute lunch break along there, and it was still.
One thing was we were worried, like you said, you have to get to Hanggu by a certain time for the bus, but also we thought after having been into Santiago and going through that process for the Compostela, we didn't know what to expect in Hanggu to get your certificate, and it was a completely different. And there was not a line, as Andy said, you just walk right in, right up to the desk, and someone helps you out. There was not any wait time to get your certificate, but that's what we expected to be waiting. So we were worried about getting there in time to get that done and then make our bus. And so that's why we just had decided to spend that extra night near Hanggu, so that when we got there, we just went to the bus and went to our accommodations. And the next day that we had free is when we went back to the shrine and got our certificate and did our drum ceremony and all of that. So yeah.
Okay, another question about hot beverages. Are herbal or non-caffeinated teas available?
I'm not a tea drinker. I'm pretty sure because Kate, my wife's a tea drinker. Kate, maybe you could go off mute if you're there and answer that question. I don't know where Kate is, but
I want to say
non-caffeinated teas, absolutely. Tons of green teas, tons. Yeah, it's actually easier to find than caffeinated teas.
Thank you.
Okay, spiders, leeches, and snakes.
Now, the weird thing, Gino, I would maybe a different answer. The weird thing is we didn't see any animal life whatsoever. no dogs, no cats, no birds. It was eerie, spooky. And around a few days into it, we suddenly realized I haven't even heard birds singing. And so that was kind of bizarre. I don't know what, Jeannie, I
Yeah,
don't know
that's
what
true.
your
Well,
experience
one
was.
thing is funny is when we got the guidebook from the Tourism Bureau, and they talk in there about snakes on the trail,
Right.
right? And yeah, about being careful and having, you know, boots and all this stuff. We had no trouble. I don't know if that's more of a thing in the summer when it's hotter, or yeah, we did not see any of that. And definitely at the accommodations there was no issue with spiders, and definitely no bed bugs, which I think is the problem on the Caminos. But yeah, no, we didn't see any kind of insects or anything.
Marula's got her hand up, I see.
It's a question for Jean. Did you also walk last year?
I'm sorry, did I also walk what?
Did you walk in 23 or 22? When did you walk?
Oh, this year, 23, in May of this year.
I'm gonna add into the chat. It was early 2020, right before the pandemic hit. We hosted a wonderful presentation about the Kumano Kodo at a Berkeley library.
Mhm.
And I put the link to the recording in our chat. So
Great.
if you want more information about this Kumano Kodo, the presenter is a super fan, Roxanne Morgan. She's from the Sacramento area, and she has brought groups to Japan because she fell in love with this pilgrimage. So check out this presentation. She's full of passion for it, and you can learn some more things about it.
Yeah.
If you want.
Yeah, I mean, that's what turned a lot of us on about it. I mean, you know, I was there, I think Marula was there, and Sue and a whole bunch of us were there. And as I recall, and of course then COVID hit 2 months
Yep.
later, but as I recall, Roxanne went with a group, which was kind of a different, interesting experience. And they actually had a tour guide, which obviously could deepen one's appreciation and be more expensive, but that's an option too.
Yeah. And at this point, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I do want to open this up to people who have questions. If you want to ask them live, you can unmute yourself. Or if you have any tips about traveling in Japan, getting to the Kumano Kodo, or making the most of it, anything that we all should know about, please raise your hand or unmute yourself and chime in, because we're going to wrap this up pretty soon.
So I'll add that just in that guidebook, there's chapters or little paragraphs on getting around in the trains, and how you get from place to place, with links to more information about all that.
Hi, this is Donna. I don't know if I'm unmuted, but I was just going to add for the question about single travelers. I was going to say it was just an extremely safe environment in Japan. So if the question about traveling as a single person was safety related, I think you could feel pretty comfortable. I don't know, Jean or Randy, feel different.
Yeah, I think, as far as, I would say definitely safe. Except the only thing I would say is that because of the way the trail is, it is a little treacherous as far as, with all the rocks and the roots and everything else. If you get injured, then you may be in trouble until someone comes by. But
well,
they
did have those little signs like every kilometer or so saying, call such and such, which led me to believe, I don't think I ever used my cell phone when we're on a trail, but led me to believe that you could call somebody in an emergency, because they're really, conscious of that. But yeah, I echo, what you say about safety. Obviously, I'm not a woman traveling alone, but it's just amazing how just the whole experience of being in Japan is so stress-free. And one of the factors is that street crime just doesn't exist.
Right.
And it's very liberating.
Okay, a few more questions just popped up. Is English prevalent everywhere? And do you always have Wi-Fi even while walking?
So we found, no, it was not as prevalent as I thought it would be. People do study English in school, but it's obviously a totally alien language for them, just like Japanese is for us. And so people might have a few words of it. Generally, the hotels we stayed at, there would be one person at least who spoke English, but in restaurants, people by and large did not speak English, but that's where I focused on Google. It was just amazing. It was just like, they're so used to Westerners. They just pull out their phones and everybody communicates with Google Translate. It's like automatic. It's not a stigma. It's just kind of a fun thing to do.
I echo your sentiments too. I think Donna speaking, I was traveling with Jean in May, and we were at a very small ryokan, kind of our last night. There was this woman, who was older, and she, as Andy said, whipped out the phone, put on the button for Google Translator, and just said, ask your question. And
yeah, it was kind of fun.
Yeah, although I would say that the nice thing was that most of the signage was bilingual. So you would have the Japanese characters and then English on the signs. The posts would say Kumano Kodo this way in English. At the train stations, the bus stations, all had English translations of the names. So that was really nice.
Yeah. I see.
Okay,
Francis.
how about the Wi-Fi question?
Oh,
I got you can get a SIM card at the airport or in a convenience store. I just got, an eSIM from, I think it's Airalo, AIRALO. And again, there's a chapter on that in the guide before I left. And so I never worried about having data. I think, yeah, in the ryokan, I don't know. I wouldn't even, I had data in the ryokan, so I wasn't worried about whether there was Wi-Fi or not. Do you remember, Jean?
I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure we had Wi-Fi everywhere we were.
Yeah.
And
we did as well. It just wasn't always very robust. So I'll second Andy. The phone data plan came in handy.
And Donna, I can't remember if it was there. Was it Japan that Mark bought or rented a Wi-Fi, portable Wi-Fi? Was that?
he rented a portable Wi-Fi at the airport. So it was
Right,
something that he had to pre-plan. But then also, I've got to say, the signage on that trail is, very good. And it's not like the Camino where, you're at a city and you're wondering which road or which, part of the roundabout to go on. I mean, the trail is pretty clear. Is very clear, as Andy indicated in his picture.
It's really hard to get lost. Even me.